Movie adaptations can be really tricky to pull off. I'm sure at some point this was a good idea, but when you have dozens of them trying to cash in on the original creations, it can only fail so hard. I've seen this happen a lot in the past, especially with live action films like Alvin and Garfield. But in recent years, I think it's getting a lot better with the releases of Captain Underpants and the recent Mario movie coming out. But I think what I want to do is go through some movies that both worked and failed as adaptations. Surprisingly enough, Pixar doesn't really have any based on book movies from doing research. Most of the movies they made are original works, with a lot of care and passion that were put into them. With, some exceptions, honestly. So I don't really need to go in depth with their catalog. They're pretty much the only studio that manages not to have any adaptations whatsoever. Both Finding Nemo and Monsters Inc. aren't really based on books, and those are my favorite movies from Pixar. So let's move on to DreamWorks. They have a lot of movie adaptations that are kinda hit and miss, honestly. Did you know Shrek was based on a book? Me neither. Mr. Peabody and Sherman was based on a series that was made back in the late 50s, and I think it turned out pretty okay in terms of storytelling and writing and visuals. The Captain Underpants movie was really surprising to me because I never thought the series would ever get its own movie, but they managed to pull it off really well. Then there's The Bad Guys. Yeah, not my favorite modern DreamWorks movie, honestly. The visuals were pretty good on their own, but I don't know, the story isn't really interesting, and I found the movie kinda dull to be honest with you. So with DreamWorks out of the way, let's move the spotlight to Blue Sky. They have 4 movie adaptations, those being Hoy News a Who, the Peanuts movie, Ferdinand, and Spies in Disguise. Hoy News a Who is not really a good movie, but I think it feels like a traditional Dr. Seuss movie. Both Jim Carrey and Steve Carell are my favorite actors, and yet I feel like they were given a mediocre script to begin with, and the writing is a bit wonky and sometimes has pop culture references in almost any scene in the movie because they think kids might understand the reference. In this case, they really don't. Then there's the Peanuts movie. Believe it or not, this was actually directed by Schultz's grandsons. That rarely happens, but I'm glad Blue Sky let them direct. And I understand why, because this feels like a Peanuts special being brought to the big screen. The characters are the same as they were in the specials, even though I didn't really watch any of them as a kid. The designs are really great, with 3D models mixed with 2D animation. The movie is fine. It does have a few problems within the writing and story, but I'm fine with it existing. I don't really have a lot to say about Ferdinand and Spies in Disguise because one of them is based on a book that I don't really care for, and Spies in Disguise is based on a short film, Pigeon Impossible, that was made in 2009. Even though this movie is really great, I don't really have a lot to say about it, and its backstory behind it. Maybe if I do a Blue Sky video someday, I might talk about it. I don't know. Sony Pictures Animation is kinda odd to me because they can make the best adaptations ever, or the worst adaptations ever. Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs is probably the best adaptation from Sony. It was directed by the same guys who directed the Lego movie, and you can tell by the humor and visuals. But there's the bad ones. How about the Smurf movies? The first one was probably the first movie I ever walked out on because there was nothing that was interesting to me. And maybe the camera angles may have gotten me a headache. Yeah, it's not really a good sign when your movie gives people headaches. Then there's Spider-Verse, in which a lot of people seem to like or love. It might be considered a good sign of actual good movie adaptations to come. And I guess there's the Emoji movie, where it's based on the emojis, but let's not go there. I don't know, there's not too much to say about Sony Pictures aside from the fact that they made garbage movie after garbage movie after garbage movie, with some good ones here and there. And finally, we move on to Illumination. Ooh boy. The studio is notorious for having Dr. Seuss adaptations for not being that great, but kinda disrespectful to the source material. The Lorax was kinda one of them. It destroys the original message of the original Lorax while having mostly unfunny chicanery because that's what the writers think that's apparently funny. But hey, at least we got How bad can I be? Or whatever the fuck that song was, but hey, the movie isn't awful. Then there's The Grinch, which some people liked, but didn't really land that well with critics. It has the exact same problems with the Lorax, but at least they put some effort into the writing, I guess. But honestly, with the Dr. Seuss adaptations here, I just prefer the Cat in the Hat, because it's at least laughably bad, and at least it's enjoyable to sit through. Son of a bitch! And the recent Illumination film coming up is the Super Mario Bros. Movie, which is based on the Mario games, obviously. And for once, the original creator is on board here, so this could have a chance to be good. Or not, because this is Illumination we're talking about. The thing about adaptations is that you need to be careful what you're doing because sometimes it could damage the original product you're adapting. With movies like the Lego movie, the Peanuts movie, and the Spider-Verse, they turn out to be good in the end, but with movies like Garfield, might not get that treatment ever. At least there's an animated film about that coming soon directed by Mark Dindal, who also worked on The Emperor's New Groove, so maybe there's hope for that. But in the end, adaptations can be hit or miss, whether it be animated or filmed in live action. I know Disney has their share of movies based on other things, not to mention the amount of live action remakes they keep pulling out of their ass, which, luckily for me, I have not watched a single one of them because they are completely pointless. But I chose not to go for the Disney adaptations because I feel like that's too obvious, so I wanted to give some studios a chance in the spotlight.